בעשור האחרון היא משקיעה ומייעצת לקרנות הון סיכון בינלאומיות בתחום השקעות אימפקט. היא עומדת בראש הוועדה המייעצת ושגרירה בינלאומית בארגון Seeds of Peace. היא פעילה ברחבי העולם ועובדת בלונדון, ניו יורק, אפריקה ובמזרח התיכון. היא חוצה יבשות ותרבויות כמעט כמו סיפור חייה המרתק. הדוברת הבאה שלנו היא אנג'לה חומסי. אני גאה להזמין אותה לבמה.
Thank you. שלום, אני לומדת עברית עכשיו, אבל לא מדברת טוב, so I'm sorry to say, but I have to continue in English for this speech. Thank everyone for being here. So what I would like to do and start with is to share my personal and professional journey and what drove me from being someone who's been investing with what I would call negative impact to making an impact without so much investing, to finally getting onto that journey of what I think is the most powerful tool of all, which is sustainable impact investing. I see sustainable impact investing as the most effective way to mainstream sustainable capitalism. And if that journey was initially ignited by my background, which I will talk about, be assured that the conclusion that I've come to is really being driven by acutely rational thinking and should be relevant to the most cynical capitalist, financier, and business people amongst you. And I hope by the end of these few minutes, you'll come to that conclusion too. So first, my personal journey. So that's where I come from. I grew up, and my family still lives in Lebanon. The other side of my family is in Egypt. I have some origin from Syria as well. I'm probably the worst of all three. I also spent some time in France for my studies. So when you start with such a messy upbringing as a start, and it kind of comes quite naturally to you to want to try and solve and find the most innovative way to solve some of the biggest global challenges, such as peace in the Middle East. And so very early, I've tried to look into many different ways that I could use in order to drive and address social issues. Very quickly, I ruled out politics as one of them, just because in that part of the world where I come from, it actually created more problems than brought about solutions. So I decided to focus on different ways to harness the power of capital, harness the power of innovation and entrepreneurship to drive change. But making some impact is great, but it's hardly enough. In order to really drive change, you really have to affect outcomes materially. You need three things. You need scale, you need professionalism, and you need to be able to build sustainable business models that address these issues. So wanting to do good is very sweet, but in order to do good at scale, you need to use tools such as sustainable impact investing. And this is really the road to mainstream what I call this, sustainable capitalism. It is the tool that can achieve the right outcomes for both society and for financial portfolios. It's also a career that enables you to live in line with your values and to be at the same time an incredibly successful business person. I have not given any career opportunity. I have not given any wealth or success potential when I left Goldman Sachs several years ago, and I decided to focus exclusively on sustainable impact investing. My career has gone better, my money as well, so this is not something that are out with one another. It's quite the opposite. Sustainable impact investing is the way to mobilize in a blended manner both the positive intent in the positive intent of your action and as well smart institutional capital. It's a way to create positive impact while maximizing personal selfish interests. And I think this is what makes it the potential tool in order to become really the norm for capitalism and for sustainable capitalism. So I kind of like this drawing because that kind of told you the story of what was old school investing versus this new trend whereby you can have this blended approach. From Goldman Sachs to the Portland Trust to Generation, I've sought to identify profitable ventures and business models that can deeply impact positively people, the planet, profits, and often to peace and prosperity. And that can do that at scale and in a sustainable way, and as a result can be really drivers of system change. This pursuit brought me to Israel last year. I came here because I saw the potential for this place and for this fantastic technology and innovation hub to be in the world, to become the gateway to emerging markets and really the hub, the global hub to solving some of these real need global challenges. In fact, I really see it being the capital for impact innovation and sustainable development. And it doesn't need much to get there. It's all about this intent and realization of this new way of investing and of doing business. So whilst a lot of the innovation that I've seen in the Silicon Valley throughout my career and through my investing has been more geared towards US consumer, high amount of wages per capita, and rather fluffy end markets, innovation in Israel is driven by real needs. Not so easy neighbors, I know that well. Not so easy land, not so easy water conditions, and I can go on. And so the solutions are very relevant to much of the challenges that are faced by emerging markets, and generally by the people globally at the bottom of the pyramid that are really suffering from issues around lack of energy, access to energy, by water scarcity, and by a whole lot of other amounts of issues. And sadly, that is a huge and vastly growing business opportunity, and this is a big market to address. So concretely, how do you do it? The good news is that there are many ways to do it. And there's many ways to get onto the sustainable impact journey. It's exactly the same way that when you wanted back in the days to get into a normal business or finance career, there's different approach that you can choose and take. And you can really decide what fits you according to your own profile and to the spectrum of return, risk, and type of impact that you chose to focus on. I chose several avenues. Today, I'm working with Keren Investments, and we've been working together on bringing impact innovation made in Israel to the vast, needy, yet very hard to navigate Indian markets. Also, with another firm, Ignite Power, we're deploying decentralized solar energy and impact technologies in Africa and helping build the impact investing ecosystem out there. And at the same time, this is achieving the fourth level of impact, which is to bring Israel closer to very important neighbors and to very important, powerful countries today, being East Africa or being the Indian market. I do that as well with the Middle East, with one of my other hats. Finally, with Generation and Microvest, I've been investing globally in sustainable private businesses and solving global challenges. Yet, we've been returning well above market returns and really delivering on our portfolios of investments for institutional investors worldwide. Finally, Purpose is a great firm. It's a movement builder with bringing purposeful ventures to a whole other level of scale and awareness. So my personal and professional background and journey got me here. But now my goal is to truly mainstream this mindset of sustainable capitalism and to do it as fast as possible. I see that the world is changing in some really, really profound ways, and I worry that still a lot of people in the private sphere are not paying enough attention to these biggest challenges. Investors and country leaders, it is reckless to ignore these things because doing so jeopardizes long-term prospects of nations, of businesses, and of investments. And here's something that might surprise you. I've seen throughout all this work that the balance of power to really influence sustainability rests with all of us. It is a bottom-up process. It rests with investors, it rests with entrepreneurs and CEOs, with pensioners and foundations, and with voters and political leaders. And one of the answers to this, to bringing about sustainable impact investing, one thing that I want to say is that it's much less complicated than most people think. It is better performing as an investment than most people believe, and it is way more important to scale now than we can ever imagine. This is not a small problem, indeed. Let me remind you what I guess a lot of you already know. We have a population that is both growing and aging. We're about 7 billion today, heading to 10 billion by the end of the century. We consume natural resources faster than they can be replenished. We lack clean and abundant water in many geopolitically sensitive parts of the world. Corruption and lack of governance is creating political instability in many places as well. There are people in the world, there are more people in the world that are either obese or malnourished than actually healthy. And climate change is affecting more people more often through natural disaster and drought. So that sounds like, environmental and social issues, right? Well, that's not all. Those are economic issues. Those are business issues. They are relevant to risk and returns. They are relevant to exposure of portfolios. So does it seem too complex to account for? Do you think those issues are too far off to actually be relevant to investments? Is it better to just put our heads in the sand and not think about them? Well, be sure that they will bite back at you much faster and intensely than you think. And this is thanks to technology, to big data, to social media, to the raising awareness, and so on. All these things will make sure that those that are creating negative externalities will have to be held accountable for. And being through both like consumer awareness or through regulatory backlash, things are moving now very, very fast. So that's why old school investment as usual, is not fit for purpose anymore. I think that traditional financial analysis is necessary. Of course, you cannot go past that. You need it. But it's not necessary. It's not necessary. It's necessary, but it's not enough anymore. It's not complying with basic fiduciary duty. Sustainability and impact are not about being a want-to-do-good person only. It makes just basic rational sense. It is about limiting future risk. It is about minimizing harm to people and the planet, seizing growth opportunities, and by being on the right side of massive secular trends, and avoiding generally popular and regulatory backlash. And it means really providing capital where it's deployed towards more productive outcomes. In a word, it means being a smart investor. It is the right thing to do. It makes sense for me, but I hope that more and more people understand that it makes sense for all investors. It makes sense for all entrepreneurs and CEOs. And it makes sense for foundations, for voters, and for political leaders alike. So, as I said, and throughout the different ways that I've gone about bringing impact, I've never made a trade-off. I've never made a trade-off career-wise or performance-wise, quite the opposite. So, if it makes economic sense for the planet, and if it makes economic sense for your portfolio, and if the planet benefits, and if the people are happier, shouldn't this be the norm? Long-term value creation and long-term prosperity require the effective, sustainable management of financial capital, human capital and physical capital. Solving the biggest environmental and social issues that are looming at us, and which are truly double-digit growth markets, requires to harness the powerful forces of capitalism, entrepreneurship, innovation, investments, and to catalyze them with a deep intent to create positive impact, to be on the right side of these trends. Not only do we need to fund those capable of creating and implementing innovative solutions so that they achieve the scale that is needed, but we also need to stop financing those that are doing the opposite and who are part of the problem. And again, I really believe that this is the duty of all investors, of entrepreneurs and CEOs, of pensioners and foundations, and voters and political leaders alike. So do you still wonder, after all this, why do I need to do it? Shouldn't it be government responsibility? Well, the answer is actually very simple. It's money talks. And there is much more money and power to be applied on this bottom-up basis than there is from a top-down one. Market forces are very powerful. They're beyond government and beyond philanthropy today, which have limited resources. I heard someone say once, governments have budgets, but they have no money. Companies have much more money. Unfortunately, not often enough do they have the right budget or vision. And what if all this sustainability what if all these sustainability issues and challenges are exaggerating? And what if it is a big hoax and we're creating a better world for nothing? Well, you know, I think that tells it all. I think that it wouldn't be silly to try and improve the world and reduce the risk to the planet and still generate good economic performance. So just to finish and to conclude, there's a quote that I've seen and that I like and I live by, and which is, plan for the future, because that's where you're going to end up spending the rest of your life. Thank you.